My name is Melissa Hartwell. I'm 45 years old, and my mother has missed almost every one of my son's birthdays for 17 years. So when she ordered him to cancel the trip he'd spent 2 years saving to babysit for my sister, my quiet, careful boy did something nobody in this family had ever done. He told her no. She sent him a text that ended with the line, "After everything this family has done for you." He answered with one screenshot, no caption, no explanation. 20 minutes later, my sister called me crying so hard the only word I could make out was camp. But the screenshot was just the opening move, because what my mother did at his graduation party, in front of 30 guests, forced me into a choice I'd been running from since before my son was born. Welcome back to Revenge Stories, where family secrets come to light and quiet people find their voice. Grab your coffee, because this one starts with a birthday cake and ends with a question I never thought I'd have to ask my own mother. Tell me where you're listening from today, and if stories like this speak to you, subscribe. You don't want to miss what she did once the guilt stopped working. Let me start with the last birthday, because it explains all the others. In March, my son Noah turned 18. We kept it simple: backyard, burgers, 3 close friends, my husband Dan burning the first round of buns like always. My mother, Diane, had said, "We'll see, honey." I knew exactly how things go. At 6:40, right as Dan carried out the cake, my phone lit up. "Mom." Her voice had that breathless pitch I could pick out of a stadium crowd. "Her heart medication," she said. "The pharmacy closed at 7:15. Could I come?" I'm a pediatric nurse. 17 years of learning what an emergency sounds like, and still, when it's your own mother saying the word heart, the training loses to the umbilical cord every time. I drove 12 minutes, picked up the bag, got back at 8. The candles were already blown out. Noah smiled and said, "It's fine, Mom." It always is. That night I checked the label out of habit, routine refill, 2 weeks of pills still at home. I filed it away. The drawer was getting full. I'm the steady one in this family. I work nights at a children's hospital in Boise, good at my job for the same reason I was good at being Diane Whitfield's daughter. I show up, I stay calm, I absorb. My father, Robert, was the buffer in our house, and a stroke took him 6 years ago. After the funeral, every piece of family news started flowing through Mom, and the emergencies started, always landing on me because my sister Claire lived an hour away with 2 little kids. I'm not telling you about a monster. I'm telling you about the most competent woman I've ever known. But there was a sentence she used my whole life. The first time I remember, I was 25, begging off one Christmas after 3 night shifts. She said, soft as a hymn, "After everything this family has done for you." I drove up that Christmas and every one after. It took 17 more years and one screenshot to understand what that sentence actually was. Not love. An invoice. Now the trip. Noah had worked at Vance's Hardware since he was 16, and had spent 2 years planning 9 days on the trails in the Sawtooth Wilderness with 3 friends. He'd saved $1,900 of his own money. A trail map hung inside his bedroom door, the route highlighted in yellow. There was more riding on it than a hike. Noah was a finalist for the Kessler Scholarship, which would cover the tuition gap at Oregon State our savings couldn't. His interview was 4 days after he'd get back, and the panel's favorite question was, "Describe something you planned and finished yourself." My mother was the only person who never once asked about the trip in 2 years. I thought she wasn't interested. It hadn't occurred to me she'd been interested the entire time, the way a chess player is interested in your queen. My sister Claire, 36, lived 70 minutes east with her 2 kids, freshly divorced, her ex mostly absent. This spring she'd landed the kind of chance single moms pray for, a promotion, if she completed 1 mandatory training week. Somewhere along the way, Claire and I had stopped calling each other directly. It was easier to get the news through Mom. I used to call my mother the bridge of this family. It took me until this June to understand what she actually was. Not a bridge. A toll booth. The call came on a Tuesday in May. Mom's voice came through bright and brisk. Good news. It's settled. Noah will stay with Claire's kids that week. I said, Mom, those are Noah's trail dates. He's been planning this for 2 years. A pause, not surprise, a step in a recipe. A hiking trip, she said, warmth draining out of her voice. Claire's life is falling apart, and he wants a vacation. He's 18. There will be other mountains. I told her the interview was for days after he got back. She laughed. It's settled, honey. I already told Claire. Already told Claire, before Claire had said anything to me. I turned around and saw Noah in the doorway, still in his work vest, and I could tell he'd heard every word. He held out his hand for the phone. In our family, you didn't talk back to Grandma, you managed her. He put it on speaker. Hi, Grandma. I want to answer for myself. Her voice went to syrup. Sweetheart, family needs you. He let her finish, then said, calm as a scale, I leave the 12th. I planned this for 2 years and paid for it myself, and my interview is for days after I get back. I can help any other week. But not that one. Silence. I was 45 years old and had never said that word to my mother, not clean like that, without an excuse attached. My son said it like reading a street sign. When my mother finally spoke, her voice was pleasant, pressed flat as a church dress. I see. Well, I hope the mountain is worth it, Noah. And she hung up. Dan found me staring at the phone. I heard myself say, my mother didn't argue. In 20 years, I had never once heard Diane Whitfield not argue. That's how I knew this was war. It took about 48 hours for the artillery to open up, and that's where the next part of this story begins. It never comes from her directly, that's not how she works. It comes from the choir. My aunt called first, who has never in my hearing started a sentence with hello. I just think it's sad, she began, that a boy would abandon 2 babies for a camping trip. Then came the church ladies, then a cousin who texted, wow, selfish much, with a period on it like a nail. By the weekend, the story had a shape. Claire, the brave single mother, had begged for help. Noah, the pampered prince, had volunteered and then abandoned her babies to go play in the woods. And I was letting it happen. I did what I always do, which is nothing loud. I corrected facts in a level voice, over and over, into approximately a dozen phone calls. It's like bailing a lake. But here's the detail that kept me up that week. In all that noise, one phone never rang. Claire, the person at the actual center of the actual problem, had not called me once. In our family, silence was never peace. Silence was the sound of someone being loaded like a weapon. She called on Sunday night and skipped hello. I need you to explain your son to me, she said, her voice half fury, half hurt. You don't volunteer and then dump somebody's children a month out. Everything in me stopped. Claire, back up. Volunteered. Mom told me weeks ago. She said Noah heard about my course and offered on his own, and she was so proud of him. I turned down the spot my coworker found because I had family. And now, a month before, he decides a hike matters more than my kids. I stood in my dark kitchen with my heart going like a triage monitor. Noah had first heard about that week from my own phone call, in this kitchen. I'd watched him hear it. There was no version where he'd offered anything to anyone weeks ago. Somebody had built my sister a story, beam by beam, and then handed her the match. Claire, I said slowly, who told you Noah volunteered? Walk me through it. Mom told me. Why would she? And then Claire stopped, and the line went so quiet I could hear her son's cartoon in the background. When she spoke again, the fury had a crack in it. Liv, he didn't volunteer. He found out the same minute I did. We sat in that silence together, 70 miles apart. I did what I do at work when a chart doesn't add up. I stopped arguing with the story and started checking the machines. Okay, I said, forget whose fault. Let's solve the actual week. What if I pay half for a sitter, or find a day camp? Claire made a sound that was almost a laugh. You think I didn't try? I had a camp. Registered in February, paid the deposit. In April, they called to confirm my cancellation. My cancellation? I never cancelled anything. They said the spot was released and the summer was full. The back of my neck went cold, one vertebra at a time. You never told me that. I told Mom. She said these things happen, computers, overworked staff. She said maybe the promotion wasn't meant to be. I asked the nurse question. Claire, did they refund your deposit? A long pause, her breath changing as she scrolled her banking app. There's a credit in April. $85. I never noticed that month was daycare bills and the lawyer. Somebody had cancelled my sister's childcare in her own name, 2 months before a crisis that hadn't happened yet. I didn't say the thought out loud. It was too big, and it had my mother's handwriting all over it. While I was quietly checking machines, my mother went to see Noah at work. She bought a single sponge, then stood at his register with a line forming and began the recital. Who paid for his camp when he was 8, who knitted his hat, who drove through snow. Her voice never rose, it just kept coming, item after item, like a receipt printing. Every item ended the same way, hand flat on the counter. Family is the only thing that will ever catch you, Noah. After everything this family has done for you. My son bagged her sponge and said, I know, Grandma. Just not that week. His manager walked over, friendly as Sunday, and mentioned the line. She smiled at everyone and left. That night, Noah came into the kitchen while I was packing my work bag. He stood there a minute, then asked, quiet, Mom, has Grandma ever had an emergency that turned out to be nothing? And I realized my son wasn't asking a question. He was checking his math. Thursday, the letter came confirming Noah's interview slot. His counselor called to make sure we understood what finalist meant, 11 kids left for 3 awards, full tuition gap for years renewable. And then she said the thing I already knew, the panel's favorite question is follow through. They want a project the student planned and finished on their own. If the trip didn't happen, Noah would sit in front of that panel with his story amputated. That Friday, Mom came to our house unannounced to talk some sense. She walked down the hall and stopped at Noah's open door, looking at the trail map taped inside it, 9 days of yellow highlighter, dates down the margin. For 1 second, her face went unguarded. Maps, she said, almost to herself. Your grandfather used to pin maps in the garage. Places we never went. I could see, for 1 second, all the way down to some room in her I'd never been allowed into. Then the shade came down, and she raised her phone and took a picture of the map, 1 crisp click, then told me the coffee was too strong and left. I found out later she'd been showing that photo around church and to the cousins, like an exhibit. 9 whole days for strangers on a mountain, look it's in yellow, and not 1 afternoon for his own blood. Evidence for the choir. But that night, something else happened, and this is the part everything after hangs on. At 9:47, the family group chat pinged once, a message from Mom. Before I could reach my phone, it was gone. Deleted in 90 seconds, maybe less. I saw the notification, then a gray line that said the message was removed and I thought, wrong chat, she's texting about a potluck. Nobody in the family saw what it said. That's what I believed for the next 3 weeks. But one person in my house sleeps with his phone on his chest, and what he'd already read was about to change everything. If you've ever sat in your car doing slow math on 20 years of your mother's emergencies, I need you to hear this next part. Tell me in the comments when you first noticed the pattern in your own family. Somebody watching tonight thinks they're the only one. The following week, my mother raised the stakes the old way, 11 at night, my phone buzzing, her voice small and frightened. Pressure in her chest, a tingle down her arm. I'm a nurse. I know exactly what those words cost me every time they turn out to be weather. You go anyway because the one night you don't is the night it's real. So I drove 12 minutes, and we spent the night in the ER. Blood work, EKG, clean as new snow. Here's what that clean night cost. It was the night of the senior awards ceremony, the one where they announced the Kessler finalists on stage with the parents standing. Dan went and filmed it, Noah in his good shirt, squinting into the lights, an empty aisle seat where I was supposed to be. I watched the video at 4 in the morning in an ER parking lot. And one more thing. Around 2 a.m., between tests, my mother, gowned and wired and supposedly at death's door, rolled her head toward me on the pillow and asked, in a perfectly ordinary voice, "So, did Claire call you about June yet?" I came home the next morning gray as dishwater and found Noah at the table before his shift. I apologized for missing the ceremony. He shrugged it off, then sat there a second, spoon down, doing the thing he does before he says something he's rehearsed. "Mom, I want to show you something. Don't be mad I never showed you before." He slid his phone across the table. It was a note titled "G's Emergencies," started 4 years earlier when he was 14, 18 lines, one for every birthday of his life, researched backward with dates, and next to each one, the crisis that had swallowed it. A flooded kitchen with no plumber's truck ever seen. A water heater with no receipt. A prescription with 2 weeks left in the bottle. "I'm not mad at her," he said. "I stopped expecting her a long time ago. I made the list so I'd stop wondering if it was me." I looked at my 18-year-old across a cereal bowl, and understood he had known my mother longer than I had. He'd only needed 14 years to see her. I'd been inside the aquarium my whole life, explaining that the water was normal. 2 days before graduation, my mother called with her final offer, though she'd never once in her life called it an offer. "I've spoken to the pastor," she opened, "which is how you know the choir has been fully briefed. Everyone agrees this has gone on long enough. Tell Noah to do the right thing, and all of this unpleasantness disappears. Or don't, and you can explain to people why I wasn't at that graduation." Attendance at her own grandson's graduation, offered like a hostage exchange. Something in me, worn smooth by that ER night, and that list with its 18 lines, just stopped negotiating. "Mom," I said, "you've missed 18 birthdays. Why would graduation be different?" I heard her breath change. I'd gone off script. "Excuse me," she said. "Tired," I answered. "You heard me." And we hung up on each other. So she went around me. At 12:08 that night, Noah's phone lit up on the counter, next to the graduation programs. A text from Grandma. Long, beautifully built, his dead grandfather in it, my nursing shifts in it, Claire's kids in it, ending, of course, the way everything in our family ends, after everything this family has done for you. Noah sat very still, then opened his photo album, scrolled back 3 weeks like a man who knew the exact drawer, tapped once and hit send. No caption. One screenshot. He put the phone face down and picked up his fork. Across town, something went off the rails. Grandma always answers texts like a woodpecker. Half an hour, nothing. When Noah checked his screen, he saw the little line that said, "Grandma is typing," and then it vanished. Typing. Vanished. I've stood in rooms where a monitor does that. It's never nothing. My phone rang once and stopped. Mom hanging up before I could answer, which had never happened before. Minutes later, it rang again, Claire. My sister was crying, not angry crying, a kind I hadn't heard from her since our father died. I could only catch pieces, the camp, and while she was trying to get there, Noah appeared in the doorway with an expression older than 18 by a mile. "Mom," he said, "there's something I should have shown you 3 weeks ago." He set the phone in my hand the way you hand somebody a live grenade. A screenshot of the family group chat, timestamped 9:47 p.m., 3 Fridays earlier, the night of the map. A gray bubble from Mom, the message she'd deleted inside of 2 minutes, the one I'd assumed was about a potluck. I'll read it the way it's burned into me. Claire is in a panic about the June week, just like I said she would be. I told her Noah volunteered. Better he learns family comes first while he's young. Don't mention the camp, I cancelled that back in April. If I'm the one who fixes this, maybe this family remembers who they'd be without me. She'd meant it for her best friend, whose name sat one line above cousins in her contacts. One fat thumb, one wrong tap, 90 seconds in the wild. Every adult in that chat had been asleep or working. But a boy who'd just turned 18, who sleeps with his phone on his chest, had felt it buzz, read it, understood exactly what it was, screenshotted it, and said nothing for 3 weeks. "Why didn't you show me?" I whispered. "Because it would break you," he said. And I figured I could just go on the trip and let it stay buried. But then she sent me that text with Grandpa in it. Claire had finally found her voice. She'd called the camp that evening about next summer, and the director, confused, had pulled the April record. The cancellation call had come from Claire's own emergency contact, her mother. Claire and I stayed on the phone 2 hours that night, the longest we'd talked in a decade, going back through the chart together, piece by piece, year by year, and finding, underneath it all, one thing neither of us had expected to feel, something other than cold. If a sentence like "after everything we've done for you" has ever been handed to you like a bill for your own childhood, put the word bill in the comments. I read every one, and I promise the comment section under stories like this is the least lonely place on the internet. 12 minutes for stoplights, one speech I never gave. She was watering her violets when I walked in, and put my phone on the counter, screenshot open, and said nothing. My mother put on her glasses, read it top to bottom, no flinch, a woman reviewing minutes from a meeting she chaired. Then she slid the phone back. "Well, it's rude to read other people's mail." That was the apology portion. When I stood there, she straightened her spine and gave me the closest thing to a confession I'll ever get. "Everything I have ever done was to hold this family together. Somebody had to be the reason you all still showed up." I looked for shame in her face. It wasn't there. She smiled, tidy and terrible. "Claire will forgive me by Sunday. She always needs me by Sunday." I said, "Graduation is Friday, come as a guest, not a creditor." Here's what I expected Friday: an empty seat, and a story about her blood pressure by Saturday. Here's what I got instead. My mother arrived 40 minutes early in her floral dress, took a seat dead center, and glowed like anyone's dream grandmother. I understood something that took the air out of me. The ultimatum had never been about staying away was leverage, and showing up was leverage. There was no move that wasn't leverage, because the game was the whole board. After the caps went up, she found us for photos, hand ready on Noah's shoulder. My son did something small and seismic. "I'd like one with just Mom and Dad first," he said, polite as ever. She stood outside the frame while the shutter clicked, and nobody rearranged the world to make room for her. She called at 11 that night, and I knew before answering what genre we'd be in. The small voice, the flutter, pitched perfectly for a nurse's ear. 20 years, that script had worked. I listened, then said the sentence I'd never once in 45 years managed: "Mom, you are not in an emergency, and I'm not coming." Silence long enough to reroute a river. "I hope you can live with this," she said, and hung up. I cancelled the autopay I'd quietly run on her bills for years, then emailed her, "Sunday dinner every week, planned help whenever needed, but the emergency line is closed." She read it as a declaration of war. Saturday proved it. Noah's party had string lights, folding tables, a sheet cake shaped like a mountain. Claire came early with both kids, and we stood side by side slicing fruit, talking in our own words for the first time in a decade. At 6, I heard a car door close firmly, like a gavel. My mother came around the side of the house in her Sunday best, carrying a gift box big as a microwave, working the yard like a candidate. Before the burgers were off the grill, a spoon rang against glass. To my grandson, Noah, who leaves his family behind this summer, "Oh, forgive me," follows his dreams. Half the yard laughed. His gift, a heavy gold frame, a photo of her holding him as a newborn, engraved, "Don't forget who held you first." He read it, found her eyes across the lawn, and said, "Thanks, Grandma." Mom was in the bed, right? I steered her behind the trellis, where the mask dropped entirely. Cancel the trip, she said, no syrup left. If that child gets in that car tomorrow, you have no mother. None. I let the sentence sit. You're my mother, I said. Tomorrow you'll still be my mother, and he'll still be in the mountains. Both things are true at the same time now. She stared at me like a vending machine that ate her dollar, then walked back into the light. Minutes later, as Dan carried out the cake, a glass hit the patio stones. My mother, gripping the table, hand climbing to her chest, face gone gray, not pale gray, the color that means the night becomes paperwork. Every face in that yard turned to me. I knelt beside her chair and did my job the way I've done it 10,000 times, pulse at her wrist, eyes on my watch. Where is it? Point with one finger. Her pulse tapped steady, 84, skin warm and dry. Does it go down your arm? A beat too long, and her hand drifted left, then, seeing my face, corrected to right. Pain doesn't check the audience. I leaned in close, so only she could hear me over the candles. Here's what happens now, Mom. I'll drive you to the ER myself, sit with you all night, and when the tests come back clean, you and I are done with emergencies forever, Sunday dinners, planned visits, real help, any week you name, but I will never answer a siren from you again. So tell me, and whatever you tell me, I'll believe you in front of everyone. Is this an emergency? The string lights ticked in the quiet. She looked at me a long moment, and something flickered at the bottom of her eyes I choose to believe was respect. Caught red-handed, she patted my hand, stood, smoothed her dress, and announced, "Don't be dramatic, I'm fine," walking out through the gate, past 30 silent guests. Nobody ran after her. 9 days later, Noah came home sunburned, having reached the summit in fog. In July the letter came, tuition covered for years. My mother went silent for 6 weeks, then called, asking if Sunday dinner still stood. She came with store-bought rolls, the closest thing to a white flag her hands could carry. This March, Noah turned 19. My mother RSVP'd like everyone else, came at 4, kissed him on the cheek, and drove home while it was still light out. No flutters, no calls at 11. Watching her taillights go, I thought about the sentence she'd typed by accident, the truest thing she ever said, "They only come when something is broken." Look at this yard, nothing was broken, and people came anyway. Being needed is a bill somebody else writes you. Being loved is a door you walk through freely. That's my story, 18 birthdays, 1 screenshot, a map folded into a backpack. If someone in your life only shows up when something's breaking, ask yourself the triage question: is this an emergency, or a habit? If this gave you words you needed, share it with the person who answers every siren.